Thank you for coming to the Development Committee B today. We don't have any fire alarms planned, so if the fire alarm does sound, it's back out through the main entrance and down the slopes to the Deanery Road end of the ramps, please. Do we have any apologies for absence today?
Yes, Chair, we have Councillor Classic and Councillor Windows, and Councillor Brown and Councillor Eddy are attending in substitute.
Fabulous, thank you very much and welcome. Okay, do we have any declarations of interest for today's committee? Fabian.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Item 9B, use shed. I am one of the trustees of We the Curious, but I have made it clear to them that although they've got a position, I can't be held to that, and I've got to make up my own mind based on the evidence, based on the planning case that's put before us today.
Lovely, thank you very much. Do we have any other declarations of interest? Nope, brilliant. Okay, so minutes of the previous meeting, which was on the 13th of May this year. Does anybody have any objections or any issues with those minutes? No, so can I take that as agreed? Good, great, thank you very much. Okay, so the action sheet. I think we do have some actions today, Peter.
Yes, Chair. There's an action in respect of 149 Marksbury Road, and I will come back to you. I will provide you all with a written response on that in respect of covenant payments. I think you were after an idea of what they might be. It's not planning, but I will endeavour to get an answer to you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. That's highly appreciated. Okay, so then item 6 is appeals. Does anybody else have any questions on the appeals? I've got some questions around items 6 and 7, which is Wyville Gardens.
Thank you, Chair. You are not alone at the most recent Committee A, DCA. There were questions about Wyville. I think what I'm going to do is I've got some information through. We are waiting on the Planning Inspectorate. An email came through actually today about that, so I'm going to put together a bit of a round-robin briefing note on all things to do with the Wyville Garden Centre.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And I think, did we have any enforcement notices? I can't remember. We had one.
There was one. Any questions on that one? Don't think there are.
No. Okay.
Thank you.
Did we clarify if I can ask you about electronic billboard or not?
You can ask me about a billboard. I think there is a current application which is pending determination, but
okay.
I know that there's lots of interest in that particular billboard. So
so just referring to, there's a billboard on the outskirts of Cabot Circus where they've built something slightly larger than they were given permission for.
Yeah, I think I'll be in consultation with enforcement colleagues as well, and we'll get a response to you.
Fantastic. We look forward to that. Thank you very much. Okay, so next item on the agenda is 102 Gloucester Road, which has returned to us after a cooling off period. Peter, over to you to explain.
Thank you, Chair. Members will recall that I don't know quite. Let's go. Members will recall that this one came before you at the your last meeting with an officer recommendation to approve, and you were minded to refuse this application. So the purpose of this item is to come back, bring it back before you with suggested wording for the reasons for refusal, which we've done, and they're within your papers. I will go through each to just underline what we've done and to give officer opinion on the strength of those reasons for refusal. The first suggested, you recall that you were minded to refuse for 3 reasons: overdevelopment, highway safety due to traffic movement in the busy location, quality of the living environment, specifically the limited aspect for a number of flats. On the first reason for refusal, that is for you. I put it on the PowerPoint, but it's in your papers. That's the suggested wording that we are bringing before you. You will see in your papers that as officers, we do not feel that is a strong reason for refusal and would be difficult to defend at appeal. Nevertheless, that is the wording. I'm not going to read out the report in detail. The second reason suggested reason for refusal is highway safety. There's a particular concern here, and that relates to the fact, and this actually is applicable to the first reason, and that is that there is an extant planning permission for a similar scale of development on this site. So in an appeal situation, an appellant would be saying, well, hang on a minute, you've approved almost identical, so what's the problem with this one? Equally, on highway safety matters, they would be saying that, but in addition, at the meeting when this application was considered, the report that was presented to you, and indeed the advice you received from the Transport Development Management Officer, who's here this evening, Pip, was that their team raised no objection. So we have no highway objection. So equally, at appeal, we would be in a difficult position in defending that reason for refusal. And then finally, this would fall away in the event of appeal because it's just that at the point a decision is made, there is no legal agreement in place for a Section 106 agreement in respect of affordable housing. That would fall away because in the event of an appeal, the appellants would present that agreement and it would just fall away. So we have to put that on to ensure that that work is done. So you have the recommendation, which is those three reasons for refusal, which is in accordance with your wishes at the last meeting, but you also have the officer's comments within your papers. So any questions, Chair? Thank you.
Okay, Fabian?
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, I wasn't at the last meeting, but you're basically saying that we have little, if any, chance at appeal. So there's a risk of costs and a risk of this going ahead anyway. But also another question is, what's the exact difference between this and the one that's been already got permission? Or what are the key differences, rather than getting too bogged down in detail? What are the key differences between this and the one that's already got permission?
The key difference is that the ground floor, rather than being commercial, would become residential. That's basically it. So there were on the one that has planning permission, there was a shop on the ground floor. So that has planning permission. The residential above is the same, and then this application replaces that commercial unit with residential. That's the key change.
Into the mic, please, Fabian.
Sorry, Chair. So it's 100%. This is 100% residential as opposed to mixed. Yeah. Okay.
Richard. Into the mic.
Sorry. Fabian effectively stole my thunder, so thank you.
Do we have any more questions about this? Andrew.
Hi, Chair, thanks. I thought there was retention of some shop facilities on the bottom, because there's talk in the papers about moving the entrance for the retail unit onto the Gloucester Road and therefore making it more attractive as a retail proposition, albeit at a smaller scale.
Apologies, you're absolutely right. Forgive me. That is correct. But it's the commercial, the large commercial unit that's shown there with the approved ground floor. That would no longer be there. That would become residential.
Any more questions, or is that Fabian asking another question?
Would we be able to take a vote on the original officer recommendation?
Well, first we need to try a vote on the reasons for refusal. Now, I can move that vote and we can have a seconder or not. Unless anybody has any other objections or questions, I'd like to move that vote.
It was just a quick question, or possibly a point of clarification for the other members of the committee that are here that might not have, excuse me, might not have been here last time. The concern that I had, although I kind of felt like this was dealt with in the meeting, but was around the highway works and that particular spot being an incredibly busy junction of one of the busiest arterial routes in the city and a very, very well used junction, as well as being a pedestrian crossing, and then you had two entrances to the petrol station opposite. What would happen to the displaced cars if that on-street parking was to be lost, or what the implication would be to changing of parking arrangements around that junction? Having been there a couple of times since, my concern, although again I have to come back to the transport officer, remains, it to me looks like a phenomenally busy junction, and that doesn't look to have been addressed in this application because of the basis of the plan moving forward. Is that right? As in, we could grant this subject to a condition that would fill in the details of how that would be worked out. Is that still correct?
I, like you, followed up with a site visit to be very clear, and then went back to look at the permitted development that was already approved, and then what the difference was. In transport terms, they are removing some parking, off-street parking, and that makes that footway safer. The movement into the petrol station was tracked. It's 2 movements a week. It is one of the widest junctions in our whole city. There is imminent space to work out under the Section 278. Should you be minded to support this, the 278 will deal with that. The locations marked on the plan were not what we devised. They were their own interpretations, and that's what led to some confusion. We will not be putting anything on the highway in that location that does not meet a road safety audit. And that is the evidence that was sent to us with the both applications, and therefore there would be no grounds. If it came in today, there would be no grounds for a road safety objection because everything is manageable within what the approval would lead to within the Section 278, which is the Highway Authority Agreement. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Just in terms of the question I was asking, could you run the committee through what the 278 is and how that works from this point forward?
Chair, is that okay? Thank you. The Section 278 is an agreement that we go into prior to commencement of anything happening. It's a contract between us as the city as a highway authority and the developers and their contractor. It says that this is what we've agreed is your extent of works, and it gives a rough plan of that. Then it is estimated and a bond is put in place to protect the council on anything. Then they will deliver that with a series of technical approvals which will come about. Then the final delivery of that is certified by the Highway Authority as meeting the adoptable standards that we have. That is our regular process with Section 278. So I'm very confident that we have the right message to you that this is completely manageable in road safety terms because the extent of works is from the junction corner right the way up to beyond the the proposed access point, so which covers the area over the entrance to the petrol station. And every stage of that requires a road safety audit, every stage of it.
Thank you, Chair. I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much. Okay, so at this stage, can I move a vote to confirm the officer provided reasons for refusal, whether or not we're happy to still refuse it on the basis of the reasons put forward by Peter just now and outlined?
And could I second that, please?
Thank you. Okay, so this is to refuse it based on the reasons laid out by Peter. So, Guy.
Against.
Lorraine? And so just for clarity, if you want to refuse it, you want to vote for, and if you want to not refuse it, potentially we'll then go and to discuss potentially approving as per the original officer recommendation. So basically, if you're happy to refuse it, you vote for. If you don't want to refuse it, you vote against, if that's clear. So if you're not clear, what you can do is just tell me whether or not you'd like to refuse it or... So that's against. Leslie.
Against.
Against.
Andrew.
Against.
Amal.
Against.
Thank you. Katia.
I'm the only one for.
Okay. So Fabian.
Against.
Fabulous. Well, glad everyone's being kept on their toes right from the off today. Okay. So that has fallen. So then we are potentially looking at voting to follow the original officer recommendation, which is to approve the application. Does anybody have any questions in advance of that? Andrew.
I don't think you said how you were voting, Chair.
Oh, did I not? Sorry. I was voting against as well. See, I wasn't paying attention. I know, making sure you're all definitely paying attention. Okay, so do we have any questions about potentially approving it as per the original officer recommendation? So if I move a vote to approve it as per the original officer recommendation,
Could I
can I have a
second it?
second?
Or maybe a bit.
Okay, eeny, meeny, miny, moe, hands up. Who wants to second it? I think I did see Guy's hand first. No, okay, so Fabian. Okay, so this is to approve it as per the original officer recommendation. I will start on this side this time. So Fabian.
For.
Katia.
Against.
Amal.
For.
For. Thank you. Andrew.
For.
Richard.
For.
Leslie.
For.
Lorraine.
I had added one simple question, but
Okay.
is it too late just to...
It technically is,
too
yeah.
late?
Yeah.
I was missed. For...
My apologies, Paul.
That's about affordable housing, but don't worry about it.
Guy.
Against.
Okay. And for. And also, as an answer to the affordable question, there is affordable housing as part of this as well. So that's a 4 from me. So that passes, and therefore it is now approved, subject to the original officer recommendation. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll just take a... Don't go anywhere. We'll just do an officer shimmy around and get ready for the next application, which is a U-shed. Now, you have been sent slides for this already by Peter. It's in the second email, hopefully.
Yeah,
Have you
sorry.
sent them?
Yeah, I have. Just to say it's in the second email. We've just updated them, so you've had a second email with the slides.
Okay, so does anybody have any problems with their slides? Okay, whilst you're finding them. So for the public forum, you'll have 1 minute to speak. We operate a traffic light system. So over here, the light will turn green when you've got the full minute. It'll go to amber when you get to 30 seconds. And then when it gets to the whole minute, it will turn red. And I'll start asking you to wind up in that at that point. You don't need to read out your entire statement. We will have read your statements in advance. So just pick out your best highlights and points. That would be appreciated. So does everybody have their slides ready? first, yeah. Okay, so the first person I'd like to call up is Alice Ellis, please.
Good evening, councillors. You might recall Bristol's planning committee faced another difficult decision in April 2021. Officers wanted to refuse our application to put the amazing Arc Bristol on the roof of We the Curious. In case you missed it, Arc is a glass cabin suspended between two masts, designed to lift 42 passengers 70 metres into the sky over the amazing harbour side. Officers and Historic England objected on the basis of heritage harm. Fortunately, committee members unanimously voted in support. There's a reason I'm telling you this. The application to redevelop Ushed has much in common with Arc. Both would play a major role in rejuvenating Harbourside. The heritage harm resulting from this proposal is tiny compared with Arc, but both are fantastic and both deserve your support.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Claire Beddington, please.
Good evening, I'm the Chief Exec of Watershed and we're fully in support of the application. We're part of a fabric that makes the Harbourside such a fantastic place. It's a big draw for visitors and we rely on the local environment to sustain our business. However, the setting around Watershed is tired and really needs investment. The scheme would bring a total revamp of the public realm with extensive tree planting, seating, lighting, resurfacing and an 850% biodiversity net gain. The lane behind Watershed, Cannons Road, is currently an unwelcoming place. It's made for bins, parking, deliveries and cars, and it'd be transformed into a safe and attractive area with active frontages and widened tree-lined pavements. These significant improvements, which Watershed can't afford to do itself as a charity, would revitalise an important part of Harbourside. So we wholeheartedly support the proposed development. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay, Hannah Armstrong, please.
Down on tiptoes. Good evening, councillors. I'm a heritage consultant specialising in the built historic environment. To clarify, Historic England do not object to this application, nor do they or I consider the development would harm the cathedral. The question of harm should relate solely to the consideration of very minor changes to the 3 identified conservation areas and how these changes may impact on the significance of these assets as a whole. It is my opinion that the harm arising would be at the very lower end of less than substantial. Ushed is not a historic building. It was built in the 1990s. The harm identified results only from the limited increase in height of built form in this location by 3.2 metres. No harm should be identified in relation to the wider design. We challenged the claims in the officer's report regarding the assets impacted and the level of harm cited, as well as the failure to fully consider the public benefits as required by the MPPF. Thank you.
Thank you. Perfectly timed. Stephen Davies, please.
Thank you, Chair. Dear councillors, we own 2 buildings neighbouring Ushed, V-Shed and the South Building. We fully support this excellent proposal because we believe this investment is good for the businesses that operate here and their staff. Bristol's Harbourside appeal is diminished. As a father of 2 young children, I used to bring my kids to Millennium Square regularly. I can't remember the last time I did because in recent times, my daytime visits tend to be met with empty beer bottles, other rubbish and beggars. Nearly 400 office workers will significantly increase spending in the local area's bars and restaurants, critically during weekdays, which are much quieter than weekends. A new attractive office here will help sustain those businesses across the week, which in turn means more regular and secure employment to those staff, especially those with families who are less able to work evenings and weekends. Please think about these local businesses and their staff and support this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sally Davis, please.
Good evening, councillors. I'm reading this on behalf of We the Curious, who unfortunately couldn't make this evening's meeting. We the Curious fully supports this application. The Harbourside continues its slow and uncertain recovery from the pandemic, and We the Curious faces additional challenges after a fire on our roof last year, as I'm sure you all know. Our recovery plan is putting additional pressure on our limited resources. Meanwhile, the area around We the Curious needs investment, particularly the street which Watershed and U-Shed back onto, Cannons Road, and leading into Anchor Square. The proposals to redevelop this site include significant investment in that public realm that will make it more accessible and attractive to people who may not usually visit. The development will in turn turn what is currently a tired and welcoming space into a true place for people to move through and dwell in. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tony Biddeford, please.
Good evening, councillors. I'm the project architect. This is a carefully considered design, shaped by and sat comfortably within its surroundings. It strikes a balance between contemporary and industrial design, reflecting the original 1920s U-Shed with its rooftop cranes and the maritime context. Even though the roof is just 3.2 metres higher than the current building, we've stepped the top floor back to reduce the visual impact, and it can't be seen from Perros Bridge. Unfortunately, the 1990s building was poorly designed, comprising an oversized single story and mezzanines that are unusable. The existing foundations cannot cope with any changes and need to be strengthened to make the space usable. Therefore, in a Bristol first, the structure will be deconstructed, saved and reused, something that significantly reduces waste and carbon. This is sustainable, quality architecture worthy of this amazing harbourside location.
Thank you. Dave Ridgewell, I can't see him. No, I can't see him. Okay. Councillor Patrick McAllister, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm here on behalf of several residents who've contacted me to urge the committee to reject this planning application. There are a number of reasons why they and I do not believe it's the right thing for the area and not a good deal for Bristol. We've heard a bit already about the heritage impact, and in terms of the urban design team say that the U-Shed forms part of a prominent and sensitive set of buildings which are highly valued cultural and heritage assets. The heritage impact of this proposed development are quite substantial and would damage some iconic Bristol views. In addition, the proposal would bring quite a lot of disruptive works to one of the most vibrant and touristy parts of the city, damaging local businesses, and the carbon costs of this work, as acknowledged by the urban design team, would be substantial and contrary to local plan policies BCS 1.3 and 1.5. The Environment Agency has also raised serious concerns on the grounds of flooding risks, and the removal of an iconic Bristol business with hundreds of local employees and more in its supply chain represents a negative for the city. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Kevin Hydes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm Kevin Hydes, a representative of Zaza Bazaar. The proposals will result in the closure of Zaza Bazaar and the loss of a well-established and popular restaurant. This will cause over 230 jobs to be lost. These are not just numbers and represent real local people, some of whom are with us today. It will also remove a facility where Bristol's diverse community can come together to experience cuisine and culture from around the world. This is why the application is opposed by the local community with over 400 email objections and a petition with over 2,000 signatures, and opposition from groups including the Punjabi Forum, Somalian Community, Sudanese Community, Avon Indian Association, the Bristol War Memorial Association and the Multi-Faith Forum. In forward-thinking, diverse Bristol, the first UK city to declare a climate emergency, it cannot be a sustainable approach to demolish a building with years of life left, putting over 230 people out of jobs and extinguishing an important local business and community facility. We therefore request that the planning application is refused. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Alex Vidal, please.
Good evening, councillors. I'm a chartered surveyor specialising in advising businesses on office occupation. The office market has changed considerably since the pandemic, but demand for the right offices in the right location remains incredibly high. Our latest CBRE research says that Bristol is the second highest in office employment growth over the next decade. Bristol has done incredibly well in attracting some amazing occupiers like BBC Studios, Channel 4, Deloitte, Payment Sense, Dyson. But these major occupiers only occupy buildings that meet the highest sustainability bar in the very best locations. The Harbourside is one of these locations. If Bristol wants to keep this vital inward investment that drives the local economy, creates well-paid jobs and funds public services, we need to build the right buildings for these employment spaces. As an advisor to many of these employers, I can assure you that this building meets a lot of the needs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Ben White, please.
Good evening, councillors. Can I clarify the situation regarding Zaza Bazaar? We are happy to discuss Zaza Bazaar leasing the proposed and upgraded new ground floor space if the application is successful. No decisions have been made about tenancy and all options remain open. We have been and remain in talks with the company that owns Zaza Bazaar. I do not know if these discussions have been relayed to the on-site team, though our proposals have been known about since we submitted this application over 16 months ago. We understand that many people love Zaza Bazaar. We also understand that you may be concerned about these jobs, but there is no reason why Zaza Bazaar must leave Bristol. In fact, it could still be based on this site in our highly sustainable new building. Whatever the outcome, rather than losing jobs, our proposal would actually create 446 jobs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move to the officer report now. Colleagues, you have the PowerPoint on your laptops. Ben, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So this application relates, as you've heard, to the U-Shed building, fronts the floating harbour at Bordeaux Quay, currently occupied by Zaza Bazaar and B2B Waterside. Planning permission is sought to demolish the existing building and erect a 4-storey building with 3 commercial or leisure units at ground floor level and offices above. The building would include a plant room on, above the 4th storey and public realm works to include, but not exclusive to, the relocation of cycle parking, widening of pavement along Cannons Road to accommodate the office entrance and introduction of 8 trees to the area. The building would have a total floor space of 5,802 square metres, an increase of 2,352 metres from the existing floor space. There would be a total reduction of 2,598 square metres of leisure use floor space. Given the sensitivity of the site, public interest and concerns from Historic England and the Conservation Officer, the application was referred to committee. As you can see on the site location, to the site, the rear of the site is Cannons Road and Anchor Square. To the south is the partner building, V-Shed, and to the north is the Grade 2 listed W-Shed, better known as the Watershed building. The building was constructed in the late 90s as a partner to V-Shed and sits within the City Docks Conservation Area in front of the harbour walls, which are also Grade 2 listed. Just a few site photos, as you can see. I'm sure you're all quite well aware of the location. And then again, views from Perrow's Bridge along the waterfront and the Quayside Walkway. So in response to consultation and publicity, the application has not been referred to development control by a ward member, but is considered, given the level of interest and scale of the proposal and the number of objections, the reason that we brought it to committee. There have been to date 528 objections, and these are set out in the report along with reasons for support and objecting to the application. The key reasons, other than the loss of Zaza Bazaar, for objecting were the harm to the frontage of the floating harbour, the conservation area and setting of nearby listed buildings, and say all the reasons for objection are in the report. So this slide just shows the existing and proposed, the existing elevations above, the proposed below. As you can see, at the moment, it's a 2-storey building with the setback gables. The new building would be 4 storeys with the plant room above, and retaining the quayside walkway, which runs under the upper floors, and then the view from Cannons Road and Anchor Square. We have context elevations were submitted with the application. In terms of the height issue, you can see, if I move my cursor over here, does that come up on the screens? Yeah. So you can see here the difference between the height of the new building and the building behind, and its relationship with watershed compared to the existing situation, which is down here. So that gives you some idea of the difference in height. There is a very faint red line that shows the existing height here. So the key issues, we have 3 key issues really: design and heritage, sustainability and land use. Firstly, with design and heritage, the primary concern is design and heritage impact of the development. The building would be approximately a third taller than the other buildings along Bordeaux Quay and would represent the erosion of the historic building lines and roof lines in a highly sensitive part of the City Docks conservation area. It would set a harmful precedent for future development along the quay and the loss of historic maritime history and architecture of the area, and consequently the special character of the City Docks conservation area. It would interrupt views of the Grade 1 listed Bristol Cathedral, which would be negatively impacted or lost from some parts of the floating harbour, and that's demonstrated in the Conservation Officer's comments and illustrations. And it would distort some of the wider views of the cascading topography down from the physics building to the water in longer views from the south side of the floating harbour near to M-Shed. The proposed height increase is considered to unacceptably dominate the listed watershed building when views from the centre and the cascading steps, and from further down Broad Quay when looking back towards the centre from the Arnold Finney. Although some alterations have been made to the design, and the proposed development would still be considered to sit discordantly with the design treatments and materiality of the surviving maritime buildings that front this part of the floating harbour. The MPPF sets out that great weight has to be placed on protecting the heritage assets, and justification for any harms identified must be outweighed by public benefit. Further concern is the impact on the quayside walkway. Policy requires the adjacent walkway, the development adjacent to the walkway should improve it. However, officers have identified the height of the existing ceilings in that section would run under the new development at a lower level to the existing. This would result in increasingly oppressive and confined space that would be likely to put off pedestrians using the walkway, particularly at night. The applicant has contested this and said it would only be the case at the ends, but we still feel that this would be off-putting and contrary to policies that require protection and improvement of the walkway. In assessing the full impact of the scheme, officers have weighed the public benefits fully against the harms to the heritage assets and concluded that they are insufficient to outweigh the harms identified. Consequently, the application is recommended for refusal on design and heritage grounds. Turning to sustainability, the sustainability teams have raised concerns about the carbon impact of demolishing a building under 30 years old to construct a larger building. The applicant has set out why they feel that the current building cannot accommodate that development. However, it's felt the existing building could be suitably repurposed or retained. Concerns were raised with regard to the curtain walling and thermal heating and cooling requirements. But again, this was not felt to be a substantial refusal reason. However, any negative impact should be weighed against the harms posed in the heritage assessment. Finally, the proposed land use is also considered to be a key issue. The development will result in the loss of 2,598 square metres of leisure use floor space and the creation of 4,900 square metres of primary office space. The site is located in a designated leisure frontage, and although technically policy compliant through the active ground floor uses, the spirit of the policy is considered to be to protect this part of the floating harbour for leisure uses. The development would result in the loss of 200 jobs at the existing site, but would provide approximately 450 jobs in the new office building. The officers have also considered that the existing use of the site attracts up to 15,000 people a week to the current building, and that the new office development would be unlikely to attract that level of footfall to the area. And the conservation character appraisal states that the leisure use of The leisure usage of this part of the conservation area is an important feature, and the loss of such a significant amount of leisure space is considered to negatively impact the conservation area. So overall, whilst the loss of leisure use floor space would not be a reason to refuse, this again should be weighed up against the harms posed to the conservation area. We have here some of the proposed landscape and public realm changes. Again, there would be 8 trees planted in the area, some new seating along the quayside walkway, and various other improvements, including the widening of the pavement along Cannons Road. This slide just shows a position of consultees. So I think just to set that out clearly, that Historic England raised concerns but deferred to the Conservation Officer, who objects to the application. In terms of transport, the transport team are satisfied. The Environment Agency withdrew an objection after a revised flood risk assessment was submitted. The Economic Development team support the application, but there are objections from Sustainable Cities, City Design, Bristol Civic Society, the Conservation Advisory Panel. There was no objection from the Nature Conservation Officer. So, in conclusion, as is set out in the report, our recommendation is to refuse.
Thank you. Okay, so I've got a question from Lorraine and... Oh, okay. So then Richard, to start us.
Ben, I've got 2 questions. Firstly, about the public consultation. We've heard the application's been live for about 16 months. My understanding is until fairly recently, until the last few weeks, i.e. after the public consultation, the feedback's been quite limited. We've had that rush, which is now over 500 objections since then. You mention in your report a common feature, even as wording, which to me seems to allude to, about Zaza's Bazaar, allude to restraint of trade or potentially contractual issues which are not material planning considerations. So what weight, if any, should members give to that?
Weird, but I picked that one up. The reasons for objection are summarised within the report. I don't think we operate a system whereby, because we've had so many hundred objections, they're given any greater weight. The fact, it's a tricky thing where you have a repeated text within an objection. I think it's more the quality of what's been said that needs to be taken into account, as opposed to the fact that there were 527 or when they arrived or so on. So it's much more what is actually said.
But Peter, can you confirm or deny that the specific issue about the alleged situation with Zaza's Bazaar is not a material planning consideration, or is it?
The objections are material planning considerations, yeah, and that's reflected in the comments. So that's perfectly legitimate. I mean, the fact that the point I'm making is if text is repeated, we can't discard because it uses the same text and appears in some way to be a repetition organised in that way. We can't do that.
My second question to Ben then, allusion has been made in your report to the damaging impact of the proposed heights on neighbouring views and buildings. Nearby, the Bristol Aquarium, obviously built significantly more recently, is significantly higher. So where does that place that?
So when you're looking at views, for example, from across Perrow's Bridge, that building is pretty much, well, for certain views, shielded from view by U-shed and V-shed. The issue really is the impact on the wider views on the frontage itself, which has a consistent 2-storey maritime shed view. This building would sit right in the middle of that and be significantly taller. In addition, the Grade 1 listed Cathedral, there are glimpsed views which are, according to the conservation area character appraisal, important views that would be interrupted or lost on the other side of it, particularly when you're approaching Perrow's Bridge along the waterfront. And that's addressed fully in the conservation area's comments. And the amount of harm to attribute to that was considered great. Again, the Historic England did look at this and said that some of the issues could be addressed with a smaller scale of development, but the scale hasn't been reduced, and they deferred to the conservation officer to assess the views and harms and impacts on the conservation area, and the conservation officer has been pretty clear in his view, which officers share, that the impact of this development would harm the conservation area with insufficient public benefits for us not to recommend refusal.
Thank you. Guy.
Thanks, Chair. Just a few, probably, hopefully, quick ones. Looking at page, let's say 118 of the bundle that we've got, under, what are we under? Just above relevant policies. Just above relevant policies. So the last sort of few paragraphs. In essence, it's to do with the submission from the Council Economic Development Team.
So it says urban design.
But one of the statements from the Council's Economic Development Team was, this proposal will create new jobs in the city centre. And I'd just like to know a little bit more about what underlies that statement. In other words, is that a researched statement that's made specifically to this site that takes into account, is that net, or is there an assumption that any creation of jobs in the city centre is an increase in the total number of jobs?
Thank you. I can't actually answer that. The comments that we've got were, there was a consultation process where we asked several departments or teams or consultants within the council for their comments on a planning application, and these are the comments that came back from the economic development team. So it wouldn't be right for me to try and explain their comments. If this is the bit where it says the council economic development team has commented as follows, those are the comments that we received back in support of this application.
Thanks. And it's too much to hope for that there's a member of that team here today to answer our questions, along with colleagues from Highways and so. Okay, fair enough. Thank you. So we're just kind of following on from that, but coming back into more of a planning area then. It seemed that there was possibly superficially a contradiction. The statement from the Council's Economic Development Team said it would, this development would, get the wording exactly right, this proposal will contribute towards addressing the severe lack of Grade A supply within Bristol city centre market, as identified by those two pieces of research. In the Heritage Officer's response, it said that there was nothing to support the idea that increasing the number of office space in the city centre would be, there was enough evidence for that to overcome the test, the heritage test, as it were. So we seem to have an evidenced claim that there isn't an unmet need for additional office accommodation, and an assertion with two reports behind it saying that there is. Is it for us to weigh those up against each other, or is there no contradiction?
I don't think there is a contradiction in the sense that the comments from the economic development team refer to the city centre. The site we are dealing with is within a conservation area and has a significant impact on several listed buildings and the setting of two other conservation areas. So when we assess this situation, we have to look at the public benefits, and undoubtedly increasing office space would be a public benefit, but then we have to weigh that against the harm. So whereas there is a need for Grade A offices, there may be other locations in the city centre that would have less of an impact on the heritage assets that may be more suitable. So overall, we're saying in this instance, we don't believe that it provides enough public benefit to outweigh the harms identified.
Thanks. That's enough for me for now. Thanks.
Thank you. Lorraine.
Thank you, Chair. I was curious when I heard members of the public saying things like the dustbins are unsightly, and the behind the buildings it's a mess sort of thing. And I'm thinking, well, that can easily be sort of rectified, other than building a really extremely high building, which is only going to benefit certain client group, which was mentioned, whether it's the BBC, whether it's Channel 4. So it's almost like saying, there's a privileged group of people that could potentially benefit from this site, whereas a business that's been flourishing could close down for 2 years, 3 years, however long, and simply spring back. I know that's not what was said. I'm saying that. So if Zaza Bar was to be closed down because whilst construction was going for this new building, I'm concerned about the impact on those 250 employees if we were to simply say it was okay, because you can't just say we're going to lose 250 jobs, but hey, 2 years later we might, increase the number of people accessing employment. I think that's far too subjective. So I'm a bit concerned about. I'm pro in supporting the officer's recommendation, because I think Bristol City, the city, that part of the city should benefit everybody, not just a few groups of people. So we don't want a reduction in the walkway. Saying the walkway might only be much. I'm going into the debate, I beg your pardon, but the safety aspect as well, because there was a kind of offhand saying that there's a small part of it which will be possibly dangerous, but it's okay because it's only a small part. So yeah, I'm a bit concerned.
So I feel like there's a question in there.
There is, but I don't know where it's gone. So thank you, Chair. I'll take that back.
So I'm going to put some words into your mouth. I think the question there is about the equalities report and what kind of equalities assessment has been done on this and for its impact as well, because there's been a lot of representation around the diverse range of groups that are using the business that's hosted there. Ben?
So in terms of quality, we've looked at access to the new units and the offices to make sure that there was level access. In terms of the minority groups that use the space, I'll be honest, we haven't really got the data to look at that. But as you've heard, Zaza, at this point, that the building is used in leisure uses and can be used by groups, including minority groups or special groups that want to go and use that space, they can. Other than that, in that respect, I don't really have much more to offer.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask a question and then I'll take your hand, Andrew. I've got a question around office space and the representations we've had around the need for office space. Do we have any figures about the amount of empty office spaces that are in close proximity to there? Because I've also get representations from developers discussing the lack of need for office space in that location and in very close proximity, and therefore demonstrating why they need to develop something into housing. So how many empty office buildings do we have?
Thank you, Chair. I'll pick this one up. We don't have that information for you this evening. I could give anecdote. In the planning committee, it would be unfair to kind of speculate on that. So I'm afraid we don't have figures on that.
That's okay, thank you. Andrew.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to follow up the question, follow up a bit on what Lorraine said, actually, because my question was around about the walkway. So the report says the walkway is reducing in height from 3.8, I think the report says, to 3 metres, which is a significant chunk. The applicant says it's not reducing at all, and in your verbal presentation you suggested that the truth is somewhere in between those two. So can you explain in real layman's terms exactly what's happening vis-a-vis the height in the walkway?
I can try. So when we were investigating the plans and did the measurements, we realised that the measurement from the pavement to the ceiling at present is approximately 3.8 metres. On the new development, we measured it at 3 metres. So that was where we were. Then we had communication from the agents who said, actually, that's just the side bit, and once you go under, it goes back up. So that's kind of where that came from. And then we looked again saying, yeah, I've got a section that came through, I think it was today, that I haven't had a chance to add to this because it was after the amendment sheet, but that does tend to show that it's 3 metres at the entrance and then the ceiling goes back up. So as you enter the walkway under the building, it will only be 3 metres, but then it will go back up to 3.7.
And is that for a depth of what, 50, like half a metre or something more substantial?
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
So the sections that are at 3 metres, is that like, I don't know, half a metre or something, or is it more substantial?
It's the edging.
Yeah, that's the question I'm asking, Fabian.
I can't answer definitively, but my understanding of the design of the building is that it would kind of be the concrete post, so, and then it would go back up.
Thank you. Guy?
Paul, same spot, but it was the comment from the urban design team. Adaptive reuse, question mark? I'm assuming that was a typo or a partially completed submission. I was just wondering if that reflected anything the committee should be aware of.
I think that's a reference to the idea that the building could be adapted and reused in its current form rather than the need to demolish a building that was only built 30 years ago. It's in active use, and I think that's the point they were trying to make. I think they may have just missed out a line.
Thanks, Ben. Fabian?
Yeah, I was going to sort of raise the question about, options to retrofit. I mean, there's talk about sort of wasted space on the site. And, I am questioning, office space, as you've rightly pointed out, some office space in the city has been converted into housing because there's too much office space. There's quite a lot of offices, quite a lot of good new offices still going up. People post-pandemic are doing blended working, so it's like yesterday and today I was in the office, the rest of the week I'll be working from home. And others, thousands and thousands of other office workers will be doing exactly the same thing, so that actually reduces that potentially reduces the need for more office space. And maybe we should be thinking about, if we are going to change the use of this building, then is that the right change? Or change the use of the site predominantly, is that the right change of use? And I'm not convinced.
Is there a question there, Fabian? Because we're still in the question stage.
Yeah, so, was retrofit seriously considered? Because as people have recently said, it's only 30 years old and there's an awful lot of environmental, CO2 loss in demolishing a building that's so effectively young.
So my understanding is that this was investigated by the applicant prior to the application coming in, and it was decided that because of the way that this building is constructed, that they couldn't retrofit it to get the size and scale that they wanted. That's not for us to say that they couldn't have retrofitted it for something smaller, which might have been acceptable. But it couldn't be retrofitted, and the foundations, I believe, weren't strong enough for them to have used the existing frame of the building. I think the foundations can be to be reused, but the frame of the building wouldn't be able to hold a larger development, and because of the way that the floors inside the building are designed, they wouldn't be able to retrofit it with sufficient ceiling height to reach grade A offices and 4 floors within it. So that's why, as I understand it, this application has come in without the ability to retrofit.
Thank you. Katya? Into the mic.
Sorry. One of the things they mention quite a lot of is attracting A-list companies to Bristol like Dyson, etc. But would 4,900 square meters be sufficient for the BBC or Dyson or some such company? It seems still quite small for what they need. And also, parking, all the kinds of facilities they might need are not really around the harbour.
So we're going to flip this one. I'm going to take the parking point first. It's a car-free development. There is sustainable transport involved, and as it says in the report, the transport development team don't object. There are 2 large car parks nearby, and there are various bus stops nearby, but there's no parking on site. In terms of the size of the office, I'm going to switch over to Pete for that part.
I think the important thing to say is that there is, and apologies, we don't have the figures for this, but there is a demand for high quality office accommodation across the city. I think that's the point that's been made. So that has held up post-COVID, and there is clearly demand. So I think in terms of advising you in your consideration this evening, that has to be part of it, and that's reflected in the comments that have come through from the economic development team. Anecdotally, it's the lower quality that there is less demand for. So people are coming back to the office, to offices in the city centre, but they're expecting a high quality of office accommodation when they do so.
I guess there's a question there as well around whether or not this is the location that high quality office provision would be required, or whether or not it would be in Finsel's Reach and the Temple Quarter, which is what other developers are making significant representations of, and that they don't want it in the city centre. Will this be at the city centre?
Again, we can only assess this application based on the location of this application. And this is the application before us. We've identified, as I say, the potential harms to the heritage assets in the conservation area in this location for a building of this size. But it wouldn't be for us to decide whether or not this development should be somewhere else. That's one for you.
Okay, thank you. And then before we do move on to the debate stage, could you just expand a little bit on the importance of this location for leisure use over office usage?
Yeah, so the conservation area character appraisal is very clear that this area is an important, or has an important leisure function. It has been in leisure use for many years now, and as the docks kind of died away, the leisure function came in. So it's a key to attracting tourists to the area, to remaining, or for the area remaining vibrant. There is in the report I set out the policy in terms of the importance of the leisure usage. It's also a designated leisure frontage as well, so that basically means that we would be looking for leisure usage at least on the ground floor, and active usage on the ground floor. This is slightly more complex in that the first floor of the building is also in leisure use, but isn't necessarily captured in the wording of the policy. But the spirit of the policy is that this area should be supporting leisure usage and be of leisure usage to attract people into the city centre. As I said, because technically we couldn't recommend refusal on the grounds that there is an overall loss of leisure floor space, but given that this is highlighted in the character appraisal as part of the special character of the conservation area, we have advised that this should be weighed in the planning balance against the harms to the heritage assets, of which the conservation area is a heritage asset.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we seem to have run out of questions now, so we're going to move to the debate. I can see Guy in his enthusiasm has... Yep, and then Councillor Francis, and then Andrew and Fabian.
Thank you, Chair. I could still be persuaded either way on this one, I have to admit, but I am looking at... So I urge colleagues to do their best. This is a really, really critical area for the city. This is a site that has a particularly large number of jobs hanging off it just from its day-to-day operations, let alone the knock-on impact on its supply chains, which are obviously significant. And as we've heard from a number of the public forum statements representing the nearby businesses, either way, a huge number of jobs potentially hang in the balance. In addition to which, this is a key tourism site. It's part of our key external offer, as is mentioned in the officer's report. It's one of those places people come into town to go to. And I would say, and how much weight to give this is still something I'm weighing up, but it does strike me as being one of the very few premises in the city centre that genuinely does draw people in from all across the city, from a huge array of backgrounds. I mean, you can't go in there without noticing that there are people from all over the city. And it's hard to think of a similar leisure space that size devoted to being a restaurant. I think it's achieved something quite special there. I have to admit, I am struggling a little bit with the economic development arguments. When you actually follow the two sources cited by the Council's economic development team, the data set is the same for both sources. It looks superficially like it's three, like it's coming from the Council's team and from two different reports, and actually all refer back to the same piece of work by Savills, which seems to be, and I am no expert on this, seems to be a direct comparison between the current situation and Q1 of 2021. In other words, an economic period in which I think there were 4 or 5 working days in total. And it's great to know that things have gotten better economically since then, but I don't think that's necessarily the best guide as to what we should expect. In addition to which, the same report mentions 9,050 jobs, which in relation to the number of pieces of office accommodation we've seen going through planning over the last 12 months, actually doesn't sound like that many. And as the officer's report says in the heritage statement, nothing's been put in front of us to give us an indication as to what the new trend from working from home has done to demand for office supply. We can only assess what's in front of us. But the market has done this to Bristol before, where we notice that there's a shortfall of one thing, so everyone frantically rushes their capital into providing more of it, only to find that we have a massive glut of it a few years later. I am genuinely worried by the green light that the Council's given to development across the city that might well lead to a worrying volume of derelict office space in not too distant future. So as I say, I'm still weighing this one up. I'm still open to being persuaded. But at the moment, whilst I'm absolutely not someone, I don't think I've ever voted to turn something down on heritage grounds before. In this one, I'm genuinely a little bit concerned by the sort of economic promises that this development's making versus the massive loss of jobs we'd see in the short term. So I'll leave it there for now. Cheers, Chair.
Thank you. Lorraine, sorry, I think your hand went up first.
Thank you. I think I feel, having read the reports and heard the conversations today, that there are some real concerns around this is quite a new building and why we would advocate ripping down a 30-year-old building to start again from scratch, to build something that no one can substantiate. I think this, the centre of Bristol is not just an office block, and it should be accessible to everyone. I've lived in Bristol all my life, as everyone will know, and I've been going down there, well, I don't want to say how long, but from very, very early age, from my teenage years, and I think that's what's unique about Bristol. And if we think 30 years old, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. So I support the heritage side of this. I think we don't need another luxurious office block right in a prime position, and I will be refusing this. So I'll be supporting the officer's recommendation. Sorry, get it around the right way.
Yep, we got you. Okay, Andrew, then Fabian, and then Richard.
I think actually Councillor Eddy, I think he indicated before me. So
I'm the chair. I've said Andrew.
Okay. I think we've seen and read some good reasons to support this, but I think we've seen some bad reasons to support this as well. And likewise, I think we've seen and read in the various submissions some good and bad reasons not to support this. I think for me, the representations we heard with regards to the public realm are absolutely right. The rear of the
fee shed is a pretty dismal place to be when you walk down that towards Anchor Square. It's not very pleasant, and improvements to the public scene on that side of the buildings would be very welcome. That is very true. But I am concerned that some of the talk with regards to the area around there being tired is a suggestion that it's the wrong type of businesses that are currently occupying those buildings, and that they are not attracting the potential clients for some of the surrounding businesses. And that I have a great deal of reticence about supporting that kind of argument. But fundamentally for me, I agree with the officers with regards to the presentation of that series of buildings along the waterfront and the identity of that, the heritage asset value of that as part of Bristol's waterfront and part of the conservation area around the harbour side. The watershed, the fee shed, and then, sorry, the watershed, the U shed, and then the fee shed, as things stand, I think that profile deserves to be retained, and I will not be supporting an increase in height on the U shed and therefore voting against this application.
Thank you. Fabian, then Richard.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I think, you know, the only possible reason you could have to justify demolishing a building that's only 30 years old is because it had structural faults and would have to be demolished anyway, in which case we're in a different place. But, you know, I got the bus here tonight, and walking across the centre to come up to City Hall, I had a look down and I could see, you know, you've got the watershed building, then you've got the current U-shed building, which is already considerably larger than the watershed. And this proposal will be substantially larger still. And, you know, there's no way around it. It will, you know, this is a harbourside area that's been largely converted to leisure. And there's no way around having a much larger building suddenly in the middle is going to completely disrupt the area. I mean, can you imagine, you know, you think about the docks in Liverpool, somebody suddenly dropping one of the original buildings and putting something in that's 2 or 3 floors higher just for some more office space. You know, they wouldn't do it. I do think, you know, as far as I'm concerned, there's no reason why the landscaping that's suggested can't happen anyway. There's nothing to stop the rear of the current building being opened up to create a more welcoming presence. There's no reason why pavements can't be widened, trees can't be planted. We can improve what's there. I'd also add that one thing that's very noticeable as you walk past Zaza Bazaar, there's the old nightclub entrance that's presumably just exits for the restaurant now. But that block, that sort of bit of the ground floor facade needs tidying up. You know, so, but, you know, tidying up the building isn't the same as dropping it and starting again. You know, and I do think that, you know, 450 office jobs when we're not completely sure how the office market's going to work out post-COVID, you know, who for? That's not established. You know, it's not as if they said, oh, we've got a client and it's going to be XYZ moving in. So I'm not too sure that a leisure area is the right space for office space. I think, you know, it's where you go to unwind. The numbers, the footfall that Zaza Bazaar attracts is significant. Taking that out will have a significant knockout on effect on the rest of the leisure area. I think, you know, the fact that you've got the sort of the lower edges at the end, you know, into the walkway is going to make it look less welcoming. I think there's better ways of making the existing more welcoming, tidy up what needs tidying up, improve the lighting. So, yeah, I can't support the proposal, and I will have to support, you know, I think all the officer recommendations and reasons for refusing are sound, and I will be voting in line with the officer recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
I regularly get a sense of deja vu sitting in this council chamber, but rarely as vividly as when I heard Alice Ellis in the public forum speaking from Mark Bristol. Now, back in April 2021, in this very chamber, DCB met. Only Fabian and myself were members of that committee, and we considered the application for Arc Bristol an innovative scheme, as she mentioned, then proposed for off of We the Curious. To cut a long story short, the officer recommendation was for refusal on the grounds of damage to the conservation area and sites of historic assets like the cathedral. Members deemed, when they heard the scheme, they were overwhelmingly convinced we should go with the side of progress, and we actually voted unanimously in favour, deeming, in my view correctly, that there was zero damage, or very marginal damage if there was, and the economic cost and the benefits for the leisure industry and Bristol were immense. And it strikes me that this is a key precedent when we debate this today. I'm a proud Bristolian, and clearly I want to honour our rich history in the future, of course, and in the present. But Bristol's a living, breathing city where people have to work, rest and play. We need to house people. We need to create jobs for them now and in the future. And I'm sorry, but the docks are no longer a working commercial docks. They evolve, and I think this is an innovative proposal. The scheme, both in design to instruct, is interesting and far from dominant and overbidding. And I urge members to look at this. I believe the enhancements to the public realm, the landscaping, all positive things, and there would be potentially a very major, almost 500 jobs preserved longer term. So that's got to be something to look positively. So I am minded strongly to vote against the officer recommendation.
Thank you. Fabian, you wanted to come back?
Yeah, on the point of the Arc, I think this is a very, very different deal to the Arc. The Arc was an extreme, to me, was a very beautiful concept, and it was a moving concept. So it's something that would come up and go down, and then when it was finished, it would have been parked on the roof of We the Curious. You know, this isn't some, you know, this is an office building. This isn't some kind of mobile, moving, you know, attraction. This is something static. If this goes in, it sits there, and if we don't have tenants for it, it's going to be sitting there with 2 let signs on it. So it's a very different beast to the Arc. I remember passionately arguing in favour of the Arc. I thought it was an incredible thing. I do hope it does come to Bristol at some point. But that is a completely different beast to this. And I think, you know, I don't think the two are... I know there was heritage issues for the officers in both cases, but I think this is different and it's entirely okay for us to reach a different conclusion with this one compared to what we decided on the Arc.
Thank you. I mean, that ties into something that I wanted to say as well, is about the importance of leisure in this location as well. And I think we all agree that it would be great to have the public realm tidied up there, and things could be done with the existing building that would do that, and it would be great to see that. But the importance of the leisure industry and our need to support it can't be understated, especially at this particular point in time. And we need jobs, we need a range of jobs, but we need a wide range of types of jobs, not just office-based jobs. There are more than one way of making a living. And as I think you said, Fabian, the draw that the current business is providing for the local area actually has a massive economic impact and benefit beyond what an office-based economic draw could provide. And I think we do just need to be supporting the leisure industry and our heritage assets as well, alongside other considerations. Now, Katya, you wanted to say something, and after that, Guy?
I just wanted to back what both you and sorry. Fabian, my brain just went close. Sorry, Fabian. I just wanted to back what you and Fabian said about the leisure industry being important, and I think the ARC was contributing to the leisure industry. This is actually could potentially completely change the dynamics of the area with an office block that's there over, and supposedly a posh office block. So it completely changed the dynamics of the area, which, as we said, is a leisure industry. And I'm really important that we have leisure spaces, community spaces, places where people can go, hang out. The idea that we have to look to big developers to build office blocks or change the heritage so that we can clean up some of our street scenes, and I don't think is really fair or right. I also question the 850% ecological biodiversity. That seemed a bit funny, but building, 4 trees, 8 trees?
Yeah.
Not sure about that.
Thank you. Guy?
Thank you, Chair. Just 2 quick things. One is, very often when we receive these reports, and I think looking at the reports that we have in front of us today, specifically in regard to the public forum, I do think it's noticeable that in terms of the response to the publicity and consultation, 438 objections received relative to 4 representations in support. And these are being received day by day. But the thing that's of greater concern, and begging the Chair's pardon, but I would love to get an officer response to this, if this is at all possible, is that David Redgwell's statement against this development is put in, I think at least in part, in terms of his role as a disability champion. And in addition to which, we've got in the public forum flipping between the different documents takes a long time. I'm thinking of the number of organisations that objected, including the Punjabi Forum International, Somalian Community Association, Sudanese Community at Bristol, Avon Indian Community Association, Multi-Faith Forum. And when you look at that in comparison to the Equalities Impact Assessment on the report, that doesn't identify us. But now I know those equalities impact assessments are produced to a formula that the council uses, but I would really love to get any steer that the officer feels able to give as to what the content of those objections were. Because as the report stands, it pushes them all together. And I'm just wondering if this committee is to apply its mind to the equalities considerations, knowing what the basis of those objections were would be very, very helpful.
Thank you. I'll try and answer that. I might have to defer to Pete, but I think if it's the bit you're referring to, they were listed in an objection. We didn't have individual objections sent to us from them.
Fab, thank you. Does that satisfy you? Probably not, knowing you.
What was the content of the objection to which they had given their names, I suppose? Was it all of the objection criteria that are listed under the responses to publicity and consultation, or was there any emphasis that we should give?
We're just trying to find it in the report.
Page 14.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that was in the report or in the objections that are online. Was it? Do you know which part of the report it's in? Because we're just...
Sorry, apologies. It's in the public forum under the statement from, I believe, from Zaza Bazaar themselves, or from written statement, public forum statement on behalf of Zaza Bazaar Limited.
Okay, whilst... have you found
and it's
it?
Penultimate paragraph.
I haven't found it. We're still looking for it, but yeah, that's why it sounded strange because I didn't remember it being in my report. If it's in the public forum, I think it came from one statement rather than individual people. So I can't comment, I don't think, on that public forum statement, I'm afraid.
Yeah, no. And so you have had your chance to ask questions, Guy, so that is the end of that. Now, I'd like to move us to a vote. Has anybody who hasn't spoken yet like to speak? No? Okay, I'd like to have a seconder for the officer recommendation to be produced, please. Okay, I'm going to let Andrew do it because you had the last one, Fabian. So this is officer recommendation to refuse. I'll do a roll call. So Fabian?
4.
Katya?
4.
Amal?
4.
Andrew?
4.
Richard?
Against.
Leslie?
Against.
4.
No? Thank you. Guy?
4.
And it's 4 from me. So the officer recommendation has been upheld. Thank you very much. We'll take a brief comfort break and I urge you to replenish your water bottles. Okay, are we all here now? Yes, we are. Great. Okay, we have no public forum for this exciting... Are we recording? Brilliant. Okay, we have no public forum for this item, so we'll go straight to Peter and the officer presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This is an exciting application. It's brought to you because of its significance to Knowle West and also to the city as a whole. This is an application for a youth centre for the residents of Knowle, to be located close to the junction of Hartcliffe and Hengrove Ways, so you'll be very familiar with that, opposite the junction into Wills. That's Wills Way, isn't it? Into the junction, I call it like the B&Q, if you know where that is. So the application site is outlined in red. Sorry, that's the best one I had. If you refer to the front of your papers, you'll get an idea of the site. The area in blue is the area set aside for the provision of the access, and that's been the main reason for the delay in this coming before you. It's to resolve access issues, to create a new junction effectively in proximity to Wills Way. Lots of benefits from this scheme. This is what it will do. You'll see that in your papers. 20 or so different sorts of uses. The scheme proposal includes a multi-use games area outside and an internal area. It's two-storey predominantly building. Just some elevations for you. Perhaps that one's a bit better to just give you an idea of what's proposed for this site. And I just included that. Sorry, you haven't got that with your papers. I just, while Ben was telling you about the last one, I found that, and I thought that'd be quite a good one, show you internal arrangement. So no real objections to this. Recommendation for approval. There will be a memorandum of understanding because Bristol City Council will be delivering the access arrangement, so that will be kind of referred to. I'm asking for delegated authority to resolve the final wording for the conditions, but you'll see there's a list of what the proposed conditions are. Thank you, Chair.
Well, that was short and sweet. Thank you very much. Okay, any questions? No questions at all. Okay, excellent. And is that debating enthusiasm? Yes. Off you go, Richard.
I'll be mercifully short. I live about half a mile away. This is a great scheme, and actually, although I'm not casting any aspersions on the station scheme in central Bristol, it's great to see some youth provision services covering the sticks or the suburbs. So again, I'll be supporting this with bells on.
Thank you. Fabian.
Yeah, I mean, this is a no-brainer for me. We are paying the price for the loss of youth provision across the city that has happened during the austerity years. This is going to be of huge benefit to South Bristol, where there are particular challenges. I'm more than happy to delegate to officers the conditions and that side of it. Let's just get it done. It's going to be a huge benefit to the young people who will be able to use it.
Thank you. Yes, it's great to have actually provision for young people being brought online, especially in South Bristol. Do we have Andrew?
I was just going to speak in support as well as a member for a neighbouring ward. This is going to be a huge provision and an out-service for the immediately adjacent to it is some sort of boundary of 4 wards, which contain some of the most deprived neighbourhoods in our city. And this is going to provide support for them. I don't suppose it's a be-all and end-all of youth provision. We should be looking at smaller facilities all across the city, but certainly I'll be supporting this as a major contribution.
Thank you very much. Guy.
Yeah, ditto and very little to add, other than say, I always check the equalities impact assessments on these because it's one of those areas where we've been caught short before for not applying our mind to these considerations. When a planning application is specifically to service an underrepresented group or I'm kind of baffled as to why the Equalities Impact Assessment isn't singing the praises of the scheme and explaining all of the equalities benefits of it. And I'm starting to wonder why we have them if we don't do them. But yeah, I'd be very happy to support this. Really lovely to see it where it is and its location, and particularly the consideration that seems to have been given to enabling disabled young people to use the site as well, which is particularly welcome. So, yeah.
Thank you. Has anybody who's not spoken like to speak?
I just want to say yes to all the other things, and they're keeping the trees.
Okay, so we love this because there's trees, there's creative arts, it's accessible, and it's supporting some of our most deprived communities. Yes, enthusiastic support all round. So I think I know where this is going to go, hopefully. I'd like to move the Officer of Recommendation. Guy is my seconder. Okay, I will start with Guy.
Oh, yes. Grant.
Yes.
4.
4. Lorraine.
4.
Okay.
It's chaos.
You're very eager. Andrew.
4.
4.
4.
4.
4 for me, so that's unanimous. Thank you very much. That brings our meeting to a close. Thank you. Go enjoy the sun.